Washington, April 25, 2025, Caroline Leavitt, a former White House press secretary under President Donald Trump and one of the youngest and most vocal figures within the Republican Party, has recently escalated her criticism of President Joe Biden, accusing his administration of significant financial mismanagement. In a series of public statements, media appearances, and interviews, Leavitt has brought attention to what she describes as shocking details surrounding the mishandling of campaign funds under Biden's leadership. Leavitt has publicly claimed that funds which were originally intended to support Biden's political campaigns, particularly during his 2020 presidential run, were either misallocated or misused in a way that lacked transparency. She suggests that the funds, meant to bolster campaign efforts, were diverted for purposes outside the scope of the campaign or spent inefficiently, potentially violating campaign finance laws. The accusations come at a critical time in American politics, just as the U.S. prepares for upcoming midterm elections, with both political parties gearing up for a battle over control of Congress. For Leavitt and her supporters, the timing of the allegations is significant. They argue that these revelations are not just about campaign finance mismanagement, but about holding the Biden administration accountable for actions that could affect public trust and the integrity of future elections. These claims have sparked intense debates within political circles and across the media. While some critics argue that the accusations are politically motivated, aimed at undermining Biden's credibility just ahead of the midterms, others praise Leavitt for highlighting issues that have long been at the center of national discussions about campaign finance reform and the role of money in American politics. As Leavitt continues to push these allegations into the spotlight, the controversy raises important questions about the transparency of political funding, the ethics of campaign financing, and whether the current laws and regulations surrounding such funds are sufficient to prevent misuse. The accusations also add to the ongoing scrutiny of Biden's administration and the broader issue of accountability in the U.S. political system, making it a key point of focus in the lead-up to the 2025 elections. Caroline Leavitt's recent allegations against President Biden and his campaign's financial practices have stirred both praise and criticism, casting a spotlight on the larger issue of campaign fund management and its potential implications for political integrity in the U.S. As the debate continues to unfold, it is likely to play a significant role in the broader political discourse leading up to the upcoming elections.
Caroline Leavitt's allegations of mismanagement in financial misconduct within President Joe Biden's campaign have sent shockwaves through the political landscape. Leavitt has accused the Biden administration of improperly using funds designated for political campaigns, with claims that the money was either misallocated or spent for purposes unrelated to the campaign's core objectives. The charges have ignited a fiery debate, with some supporting her assertions, while others dismiss them as politically motivated attacks aimed at discrediting the president ahead of key elections. According to Leavitt, a substantial amount of campaign funds that were supposed to support Biden's 2020 presidential bid were spent inefficiently, with little to no accountability for how they were used. She has pointed to a pattern of spending that did not align with the usual campaign activities, such as outreach, advertising, and voter mobilization efforts. Leavitt suggests that the funds were instead used for unclear or potentially inappropriate purposes, raising concerns about transparency and the legality of such expenditures. One of the primary points of contention revolves around the allocation of resources for digital and media outreach. Leavitt argues that a large portion of the campaign's financial resources were directed toward a series of high-cost advertising deals that didn't seem to yield the expected returns in terms of voter engagement or turnout. She has specifically highlighted instances where funds were funneled into third-party contractors who, according to Leavitt, may have been overpaid or underperforming in their roles. This, she claims, represents a serious lapse in campaign financial management and could have led to funds being misused or misappropriated. Another area of concern raised by Leavitt is the campaign's relationship with various political action committees PACs. Leavitt has suggested that the coordination between Biden's campaign and these PACs was either murky or opaque, with some funds possibly being funneled through unofficial channels, circumventing campaign finance laws designed to ensure that campaign funds are used transparently and for their intended purpose. These allegations point to a potential pattern of misuse that, according to Leavitt, could undermine public trust in the political process. While these claims are still being investigated, the accusations have prompted calls for greater scrutiny of campaign finance practices, especially as the U.S. prepares for future elections. The question of whether campaign funds are being used for their intended purpose is a matter of public interest, particularly as concerns about the influence of money in politics continue to grow. Leavitt's allegations raise larger questions about the effectiveness of current campaign finance laws and whether they provide enough safeguards against the misuse of funds. Leavitt has also pointed to a lack of transparency in how Biden's campaign disclosed its financial transactions. In her statements, she expressed concern that the campaign's financial records may not have been fully transparent or accessible to the public, leaving room for potential financial misconduct or mismanagement to go unchecked. She has called for a full investigation into the handling of the campaign's funds, urging the public to demand greater accountability from political campaigns and their financial backers. Critics of Leavitt, however, argue that her accusations are politically motivated, intended to discredit Biden and his administration ahead of the midterms. They point out that many political campaigns face similar challenges in managing funds, particularly in a highly competitive and resource-intensive election. They also suggest that such claims are part of a broader strategy to distract from other issues that might be more damaging to Biden's political standing. Some believe that Leavitt's focus on financial issues is a deliberate attempt to fuel controversy and generate media coverage as she prepares for her own political ambitions. Despite the polarized reactions, the controversy surrounding Leavitt's allegations underscores the broader concerns about the influence of money in politics. Whether or not her claims hold weight, they have brought renewed attention to the need for transparency and accountability in campaign financing. As the investigation into these allegations progresses, it is clear that the issue of financial mismanagement in political campaigns remains a key topic in the ongoing debate about the integrity of the U.S. electoral process. The allegations of financial mismanagement and misconduct raised by Caroline Leavitt against President Biden's campaign have sparked a heated discussion about the role of money in politics and the need for greater oversight in campaign finance. Whether the accusations will lead to a formal investigation or result in any changes to campaign finance laws remains to be seen, but they have undoubtedly added a new layer of complexity to the political conversation in the lead-up to the 2025 elections. Caroline Leavitt's allegations of financial mismanagement and misconduct within President Joe Biden's campaign have reignited a long-standing debate in U.S. politics about campaign finance, transparency, and the potential for abuse of financial resources. With the growing complexity of modern election campaigns, the question of how money is raised, spent, and disclosed has become a critical issue that affects public trust in the integrity of the democratic process. At the heart of this debate is the issue of how political campaigns manage and disclose the vast amounts of money they raise. Campaign finance has always been a sensitive subject, with many fearing that large contributions from wealthy donors and political action committees, PACs, could unduly influence election outcomes. Leavitt's allegations have only heightened concerns about the transparency of financial practices, suggesting that the rules governing campaign funding may not be sufficient to prevent misconduct or ensure that funds are used appropriately. Leavitt's accusations bring to the forefront concerns about the growing role of outside spending in U.S. elections. Political action committees, PACs, super PACs, and dark money groups have become key players in funding campaigns, often without the same level of transparency as the campaigns themselves. These groups can raise and spend unlimited sums of money, sometimes making it difficult to track how funds are being used or whether they are being spent in ways that align with the public's expectations for ethical campaigning. In her criticism of Biden's campaign, Leavitt emphasized how certain funds appeared to have been spent in ways that were not directly tied to the campaign's core objectives, such as voter outreach and advertising. She claimed that large sums were directed to consultants, digital platforms, and media groups that failed to produce results, suggesting inefficiency or even possible misallocation. Leavitt's focus on this aspect of campaign finance underscores a key issue in the debate: the lack of effective oversight in how campaign funds are used, especially when outside entities and intermediaries are involved. Campaign finance reform advocates argue that greater transparency and stricter regulations are needed to ensure that money in politics serves the public interest and not the interests of a few powerful elites or special interest groups. They call for clearer rules regarding the disclosure of donations and expenditures, as well as stronger enforcement mechanisms to prevent the misuse of funds. Advocates argue that the public has a right to know where political donations are coming from and how they are being spent, and that without proper transparency, the system is ripe for abuse. One of the central issues in the growing debate over campaign finance is the concept of dark money, funds spent by organizations that do not have to disclose their donors. This has raised significant concerns about the potential for hidden influence on the political process. Dark money groups, which can include both traditional PACs and 501c4 nonprofits, are not required to reveal their donors, leading to accusations that they enable wealthy individuals and corporations to secretly influence elections without public scrutiny. The growing presence of these groups has made it more difficult for voters to understand the sources of political messaging and to assess whether those funding the messages have specific agendas that might not align with the public interest. In the wake of Leavitt's accusations, there have been calls for increased scrutiny of how campaigns and outside groups use their funds. Some experts argue that the current regulations are outdated and insufficient for the modern political landscape, where digital advertising and social media have become central to electoral strategies. The digital age has enabled campaigns and outside groups to target voters with unprecedented precision, making it even more important to ensure that spending is transparent and accountable. The complexity of digital ads, online fundraising, and other forms of digital campaigning has led to calls for updated rules and regulations to address the new challenges of this era. In response to the increasing concerns about financial transparency in political campaigns, the U.S. Federal Election Commission, FEC, has been urged to implement stronger oversight mechanisms, including enhanced reporting requirements for campaigns and outside groups. These measures could include real-time tracking of fundraising and spending, as well as requiring more detailed reports on how funds are allocated within campaigns. Additionally, some experts have suggested that the U.S. should consider implementing public financing systems for campaigns, which would limit the influence of private donors and make campaigns more equitable. Despite these calls for reform, there are strong opponents who argue that restricting campaign spending could limit free speech and hinder political participation. Many conservatives and libertarians view regulations on campaign finance as an infringement on First Amendment rights, particularly when it comes to independent political spending. They argue that individuals and groups should have the freedom to support candidates or causes they believe in without excessive government interference. However, advocates for reform maintain that transparency and accountability are essential for maintaining the integrity of the electoral process and ensuring that all voices are heard, not just those with the financial means to influence elections. They argue that without clear rules and enforcement, the system becomes vulnerable to corruption, as wealthy donors and special interest groups gain disproportionate influence over elections. The growing debate on campaign finance reform is likely to intensify as the 2025 elections approach. The issue of financial transparency, particularly in light of Leavitt's allegations, is expected to remain a focal point of political discourse, especially as public trust in the political system continues to erode. Whether or not Leavitt's claims lead to a formal investigation or result in significant changes to campaign finance laws, they have undeniably drawn attention to the larger issue of money in politics and the need for greater oversight and accountability. The debate on campaign finance and transparency is one of the most pressing issues in contemporary U.S. politics. As accusations like Leavitt's gain traction, the conversation around how political campaigns are funded and how money is spent will continue to shape the political landscape. While the calls for reform are gaining momentum, the question remains, will the necessary changes be made to ensure that U.S. elections are truly fair, transparent, and free from financial misconduct? Karoline Leavitt's accusations regarding financial mismanagement within President Joe Biden's campaign have sparked strong reactions from both political figures and the public. As the debate intensifies, reactions have been sharply divided, reflecting the polarized political climate in the United States. While some applaud Leavitt for exposing what they see as serious misconduct, others dismiss her claims as politically motivated attacks aimed at undermining Biden's administration ahead of critical midterm elections. Leavitt's supporters argue that her allegations shed light on an important issue that has been overlooked for too long: financial transparency and accountability in political campaigns. They commend her for holding the Biden campaign accountable and for raising concerns that could potentially impact the integrity of future elections. For those in the Republican Party, Leavitt is seen as a principled advocate of reform, calling for a reevaluation of how political campaigns manage and allocate campaign funds. They see her as someone willing to challenge the status quo and expose potential wrongdoing, which they argue is crucial in a political landscape that is often criticized for its opacity and perceived corruption. For these supporters, Leavitt's criticism goes beyond just Biden's campaign. It touches on broader issues of transparency in political financing, an area where they believe both parties need to be more forthcoming. They argue that without oversight, the flow of large sums of money into political campaigns can undermine the democratic process, potentially swaying elections in favor of the wealthy elite or special interest groups. Leavitt's accusations are framed as a call for greater accountability, and her supporters argue that these concerns are well-founded and deserve serious attention. On the other hand, critics of Leavitt's allegations contend that her accusations are politically motivated, particularly in the run-up to the 2025 midterm elections. These critics, mostly from the Democratic Party, argue that Leavitt's claims are a thinly veiled attempt to discredit the Biden administration and tarnish its credibility in the eyes of voters. Some view her statements as part of a broader strategy by the Republican Party to undermine Biden's legitimacy and distract from more pressing issues, such as his handling of the economy, foreign policy, and domestic crises. Opponents of Leavitt's accusations claim that all political campaigns, including Biden's, face challenges in managing the complex financial operations needed to run a successful national campaign. They argue that political campaigns are often subject to intense pressures and constraints, which sometimes result in mistakes or missteps. According to these critics, this should not automatically be seen as intentional misconduct, and they caution against jumping to conclusions without thorough investigation. Some have pointed out that previous campaigns across both parties have faced similar scrutiny and that these kinds of accusations are common in the highly competitive world of U.S. politics. The public response to Leavitt's allegations has been just as divided as the political reactions. For some voters, particularly those disillusioned with the political establishment, Leavitt's claims resonate strongly. They view her as a voice of reason and accountability in a political system they see as increasingly corrupt and detached from the needs of ordinary Americans. These individuals are more likely to believe that Leavitt's allegations point to a larger issue of campaign finance reform that needs urgent attention. They see the current political system as one that is heavily influenced by money, making it difficult for average citizens to trust that their votes truly matter in the face of powerful financial interests. However, others in the public remain skeptical of Leavitt's motivations and her timing. Many Biden supporters and individuals sympathetic to his administration view the allegations as a smear campaign meant to distract from real policy discussions. They argue that Leavitt's accusations are opportunistic and that they are being made to generate media attention for herself, especially as she seeks to gain prominence within the Republican Party. Some public opinion surveys suggest that while the allegations have drawn attention, they have not yet significantly altered voters' opinions of Biden or his administration. For many, the issues raised by Leavitt are seen as relatively minor compared to the larger challenges facing the nation, such as economic recovery and healthcare reform. While Leavitt's accusations have certainly sparked controversy, they have also contributed to an ongoing national conversation about the role of money in politics and the need for more transparent campaign finance laws. Even those who disagree with her specific claims often acknowledge that campaign finance reform remains a pressing issue. Public opinion has increasingly favored stricter regulations and greater oversight of political spending, especially in light of the enormous sums of money funneled into political campaigns through PACs, super PACs, and other external funding sources. Leavitt's charges have reinvigorated calls for reform across the political spectrum. Some are pushing for a more comprehensive review of the current regulations governing campaign funds, while others are calling for reforms that would allow voters to have a clearer picture of who is funding political campaigns and how that money is being used. This renewed debate is likely to gain momentum in the months ahead as the U.S. heads into the 2025 election cycle. The political and public reactions to Karoline Leavitt's allegations have exposed the deep divides in the American political system. While some view her as a courageous figure, calling attention to critical issues of financial mismanagement in political campaigns, others see her as a partisan player attempting to damage the Biden administration's credibility ahead of key elections. Regardless of the political motivations behind these allegations, the broader issue of campaign finance and transparency is once again at the forefront of political discourse. As Leavitt's accusations continue to unfold, they could have lasting implications for the way campaigns are funded and the degree to which transparency is prioritized in U.S. politics. Karoline Leavitt's allegations of campaign fund mismanagement and financial misconduct within President Joe Biden's campaign extend beyond the immediate controversy and raise broader questions about the role of money in U.S. politics, the integrity of electoral systems, and the effectiveness of current campaign finance laws. As the debate surrounding these accusations continues to unfold, it highlights several critical issues that could have long-lasting effects on the political landscape in the United States. One of the most significant implications of Leavitt's claims is the renewed focus on the influence of money in U.S. politics. Over the past several decades, the role of money in political campaigns has become increasingly central, with massive amounts of funds flowing into political action committees, PACs, super PACs, and other political organizations. While these entities can play an essential role in supporting candidates and causes, they also raise serious concerns about the potential for undue influence by wealthy donors, corporations, and interest groups. The lack of transparency in how funds are raised and spent has led to growing public distrust in the political system. Many voters are concerned that political campaigns, particularly those involving large sums of money, are often shaped more by the interests of the wealthy elite than by the concerns of ordinary citizens. Leavitt's accusations of mismanagement of campaign funds could add fuel to the fire for those advocating for greater reform in campaign finance. In the context of the ongoing political discourse, calls for stricter regulations on fundraising and spending in elections are likely to gain more traction. Campaign finance reform has long been a contentious issue in U.S. politics. Advocates argue that the current system allows for the undue influence of money in elections, while opponents claim that campaign finance restrictions violate free speech rights. Leavitt's allegations serve as a stark reminder of how important it is to ensure transparency, accountability, and fairness in political campaigns. As the public continues to question the integrity of the electoral process, political leaders will be pressured to find solutions that balance the need for free speech with the need to prevent the corruption of the democratic system. Leavitt's accusations of financial mismanagement and her criticism of the Biden campaign's handling of funds underscore a growing disillusionment with the effectiveness of existing campaign finance laws. Currently, the U.S. operates under a system that allows for significant contributions to political campaigns through PACs, super PACs, and other funding channels. However, these contributions often lack sufficient oversight and regulation, leading to concerns about transparency and potential abuses. For example, super PACs can accept unlimited contributions and spend those funds independently of the campaigns they support. This has led to situations where political spending is concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy donors who may have a disproportionate influence on elections and policy decisions. Leavitt's claims that campaign funds were misused or misallocated could lead to a re-examination of how such organizations operate and whether stricter limits or oversight should be imposed. The public's demand for greater accountability in how political funds are managed is growing. Many critics of the current system argue that the lack of transparency allows for potential abuses, including the funneling of money through third-party groups to avoid regulations. This growing dissatisfaction could push lawmakers to revisit campaign finance reform and seek new solutions to ensure that political spending is more transparent and equitable. Leavitt's allegations also highlight the deepening polarization in U.S. politics. The reaction to her claims has been sharply divided along party lines, with Republicans supporting her as a champion of transparency and Democrats dismissing her allegations as politically motivated attacks. This division reflects the broader trend of partisanship that has come to dominate American politics in recent years, where political discourse is increasingly shaped by ideological battles rather than a focus on finding common ground or addressing national issues. As the accusations of financial mismanagement unfold, they are likely to become yet another point of contention between the two major political parties. For Republicans, Leavitt's charges offer a chance to undermine Biden and the Democratic Party, especially in the lead-up to the 2025 elections. For Democrats, the accusations provide an opportunity to defend the integrity of their campaign and discredit the opposition, further solidifying the partisan divide. This growing polarization is not just limited to financial mismanagement claims. It has permeated virtually every aspect of political discourse, making it harder to achieve consensus on key issues such as healthcare, immigration, and climate change. The increasing use of political donations and funding as tools for partisan advantage exacerbates this divide, leading to calls for greater reform and a more unified approach to addressing the country's most pressing challenges. Perhaps the most significant implication of Leavitt's allegations is the potential erosion of public trust in the political system. Trust in government institutions, particularly elections and political campaigns, has been steadily declining in recent years. Scandals involving campaign funds, financial mismanagement, and corruption have only fueled this distrust, with many voters believing that the system is rigged to benefit the powerful at the expense of the average citizen. Leavitt's accusations, whether substantiated or not, contribute to the perception that political campaigns are too often driven by financial interests rather than genuine public service. For many voters, the idea that campaign funds could be misused for purposes other than supporting their candidate's message or outreach only deepens the sense of disillusionment with the political process. This growing mistrust in the electoral system could have serious consequences for the future of U.S. democracy. If voters lose confidence in the fairness and integrity of elections, they may become disengaged from the political process altogether, leading to lower voter turnout and decreased civic participation. Ensuring transparency and accountability in campaign finance is critical to restoring public faith in the democratic process and ensuring that elections reflect the will of the people, not the interests of the wealthy elite. The broader implications of Karoline Leavitt's allegations of campaign fund mismanagement and financial misconduct extend far beyond the specifics of the Biden campaign. These accusations shine a spotlight on the ongoing issues surrounding campaign finance in the U.S., raising fundamental questions about the role of money in politics and the need for greater transparency and accountability. As the debate continues, the need for reform in campaign finance and stronger oversight of political spending is becoming ever more urgent. Whether or not Leavitt's claims result in immediate legal action or significant changes to the way campaigns are funded, the conversation around campaign finance and the integrity of the U.S. electoral process is sure to remain a key issue in the years to come. The long-term effects of this debate could reshape the political landscape, influencing everything from future elections to the overall trust Americans place in their government. Karoline Leavitt's accusations of financial mismanagement and campaign fund misconduct within President Joe Biden's campaign have sparked intense debate, not only about the Biden administration's financial practices, but also about the broader issues surrounding campaign finance and transparency in U.S. politics. These allegations highlight a critical moment in the ongoing conversation about the influence of money in elections and the need for stronger oversight of political spending. The debate has reignited concerns over the role of PACs, super PACs, and other external groups that can raise and spend unlimited funds to influence elections. While these entities have become integral to modern political campaigns, they also create opportunities for misuse, as seen in Leavitt's claims. The lack of transparency and accountability in how political funds are raised and spent has long been a point of contention, and these recent allegations underscore the urgent need for reform to ensure that funds are being used ethically and legally. For some, Leavitt's accusations represent an opportunity to hold political campaigns to higher standards of financial accountability. Supporters argue that greater scrutiny of campaign finance practices is necessary to restore public trust and ensure that elections remain fair and accessible. On the other hand, critics view the allegations as politically motivated, a tactic to undermine Biden's credibility and distract from other pressing issues facing the administration. Despite the polarized reactions, Leavitt's claims underscore a deeper, more systemic issue: the increasing influence of money in politics and its potential to undermine the integrity of the electoral process. Whether or not her allegations lead to an official investigation or legal consequences, they have served as a reminder of the need for more transparent and accountable campaign finance practices. The push for campaign finance reform, greater transparency, and stronger oversight will likely continue to gain momentum, particularly as the U.S. prepares for future elections. Ultimately, the long-term impact of these allegations may not just be limited to the political fortunes of Biden or the Republican Party. Instead, they may catalyze a broader movement toward reforming the way U.S. campaigns are funded, with an emphasis on fairness, equity, and transparency. As the political discourse continues to evolve, the question remains: how can the U.S. safeguard the integrity of its elections and ensure that the voices of ordinary citizens are not drowned out by the interests of a few wealthy donors and powerful political groups? As the 2025 elections approach, the debate over campaign finance, transparency, and the ethical use of campaign funds will continue to be a defining issue. The integrity of the U.S. political system and the trust citizens place in it will depend largely on how these concerns are addressed in the years to come.